Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, my name's Anna. I'm a clinical psychology doctoral candidate, and on this channel we talk about real-life applications to psychology. Today I'm doing a part 2 of going through my dissertation literature review. If you're not familiar with it, my dissertation is going to be on college women's participation in what I'm calling Captain Cook culture, to be PG here, to be family friendly so that this does not get censored or anything like that. So I'm going to be using veiled language to talk about this just to make sure that it's all kosher. I already did a part 1 on this, talking about the reasons why college students take part in casual relationships, so if you're interested in that, check it out as well. This is going to be a series. This particular video in the series is going to be on the pros and cons of Captain Cook culture on women specifically. The reason I've been waiting so long to do this series is because I was still interviewing participants, and I didn't want, in the off chance that they were going to find one of my videos, for them to just say what they think I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear what they authentically think about their experiences in Captain Cook culture, and it just possibly would have been a validity issue if they had come across my video where I was talking about what the literature said. But luckily I am done collecting data. I'm in the data analysis portion now, so I can finally talk about this. So today I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of Captain Cook culture for women specifically, like I mentioned, and I'm gonna start with the cons just because there are so many and they are so important. I know people don't usually stay for the whole video, and I think if you're gonna take something away from this, it really should be the cons, because the pros, they're honestly not as long and they're not as important. So what are the negative aspects of Captain Cook culture for women specifically? Huge one is double standards, and this is something that is not just specific to Captain Cook culture itself, but shaming is a huge issue. Whereas men's status is bolstered through the participation in these casual relationships, it's often the very opposite for women. Women are called a whole host of names that I won't name because, again, I'm trying to be family friendly here. But the general gist of it is that if a woman participates in these casual relationships, that she must not respect herself, or she is too easy to deserve romantic commitment. Also, by the way, there's a little baby here joining me today. You can hardly see her. Men are expected to be as active physically as possible and to seek out casual relationships, whereas women are expected to be the gatekeepers of physicality. Women are the ones that get to decide you're not allowed or you are allowed, whereas men are actually the ones who get to decide you're allowed versus you're not allowed romantically. It's like men get to decide who has enough worth to be committed to in Captain Cook culture. Men's reputation in this culture tends to hinge on the quality of their performance, whereas for women it's more contingent on them not being too promiscuous. So women are basically in this double bind where they're shamed if they participate and they're shamed if they don't, something which I'll talk about in a second. Something huge when we talk about shaming is the idea of gender roles. The main vision of masculinity, or the male gender role that's promoted on college campuses right now, is this idea of hegemonic masculinity. It's a type of masculinity where men are dominant over women and over non-hegemonic men, so more feminine presenting men, less heterosexual men. Non-hegemonic men are seen as less respectable like women because they don't express masculinity the same, and because they tend to express femininity as well. The desire for commitment in a relationship is seen as feminine, and therefore a lot of men who want to fall in this category of hegemonic masculinity, they basically shut themselves off from that because they want their friends to know that they're men, they are hegemonic men, and they don't want commitment, they just want casual relationships. So there are some studies that show that men who participate in Captain Cook culture may be doing so to assert a hegemonic version of masculinity. And if this is true, then what we can infer about the group of people who are participating in Captain Cook culture is that it's primarily based on men who want to assert hegemonic, dominant forms of masculinity. So women who are participating in this culture, the sample of men that they have to choose from is not that great. These are guys that want to assert their dominance over women. So while hegemonic masculinity is the version of masculinity that's promoted on campuses, emphasized femininity is the type of femininity promoted for women. Emphasized femininity is characterized by compliance. Compliance inherently implies that women are not making choices for their own decisions. They are doing things because someone else is making them, and they are not in power there. And then women are also in this difficult position where they're supposed to signal physical receptiveness, that they're open to these interactions to men, while also avoiding the stigma of what happens if they actually are open to these interactions. So it seems that a lot of women's choices comes down not to what they prefer, but what seems like it'll cost them less. Also, the fact that commitment is associated with femininity and feminine desires, while detachment and non-emotionality are associated with masculinity, raises questions about who Captain Cook culture is actually designed to benefit. If women tend to prefer commitment and men tend to prefer casual relationships, and the culture is primarily based up of casual relationships, I wonder who the culture is for. Another major issue is that women are objectified. Whereas women tend to downplay their physical interactions so that they're not labeled something bad, men tend to hype up their own interactions so that they are seen as more masculine and more dominant. They do this either by avoiding direct questions about their casual relationships or actually exaggerating their interactions. This exaggeration leads to a culture where men are just talking about their relationships with women in order to boost their own social status. This male assertion of masculinity perpetuates a cycle of female objectification, where guys are trying to bond with each other by objectifying women and bragging about how they have acquired these women like objects. In these performances of masculinity, because that's what they are, they're performances, women are just objects by which men can attain social status, not human beings who they respect. Another way that men tend to objectify women is by sorting them based on things like allure and respectability. So a man might rank a woman based on how attractive she is or based on how unrespectable she is. So like I said, women are damned if they participate in the culture, but they're also damned if they don't. Because it's a culture, inherently that implies that it is an ever-present atmosphere that is encouraging a specific behavior. Social pressure to conform to Captain Cook culture may give students the illusion that they're absolutely free and doing whatever they want to, but in reality they don't have as much freedom as they think within the culture. For those who don't want to participate in the culture, the pressure may be so intense that they feel obligated to participate regardless, essentially what we call peer pressure. Perhaps if women were given more power in shaping the culture on college campuses, this wouldn't be the case. But unfortunately, women just aren't given that much power on college campuses. I remember when I was in college in Georgia, sororities couldn't throw parties because if it was more than like 6 women in the same house throwing a party, it was legally considered a brothel or something like that. And that's just insane. Another really negative aspect of Captain Cook culture for women is substance abuse and the R word. And the two are really hard to separate. I'll try to talk about one and then the other, but they are really inextricable. So people in college drink. That is a fact. They drink a lot. They actually have a binge drinking culture. And that has an interesting connection to people's participation in Captain Cook culture. In one study, about 30% of college women and 28% of college men indicated that they would not have participated in certain casual relationships had they not been drinking at the time. Additionally, 24% of women and 28% of men said they wouldn't have gone as far physically as they had if alcohol had not been involved. The average college man consumes approximately 7 servings of alcohol prior to a casual encounter, and a woman consumes an average of 4.8 drinks. Alcohol increases the likelihood of a casual encounter to happen by 93.5%. And it's not even the only substance that is used and abused on college campuses. Marijuana increases the likelihood of a casual encounter happening by almost 50%, and illicit medications increase it by 30%. So it's very clear that Captain Cook culture is happening in contexts where there's a lot of binge drinking central. For instance, Greek parties, off-campus parties, residence halls, those are areas where people are drinking a lot and it's very likely that they're going to have casual relationships. So in a way, you can kind of see how alcohol is a facilitator of Captain Cook culture. And in addition to being a facilitator, it also seems to be a motivator for why these things are happening, because men tend to drink in order to develop the courage to initiate these encounters, to ensure emotional detachment, and to decrease accountability for their actions during the encounter. Whereas women who drink during such encounters are more likely to regret those encounters, which really raises some questions about how coerced are they into these behaviors. If you already have a culture where there's peer pressure and then you also add alcohol in the picture, the coercion can get pretty strong. And this leads me to my next point, which is increased risk of R word. Binge drinking in college disproportionately puts women at a disadvantage because women are more easily influenced by that substance and therefore at higher risk of being taken advantage of. This involves women who experience things that they did not want to happen, as well as women who just regret it afterwards. Captain Cook culture has been correlated with verbal coercion, so basically people trying to talk you into doing something you don't want to do. College students who endorse a belief in R-word myths tend to participate more in Captain Cook culture. Again, raising the question of who are the people who are involved in this culture, because they tend to be hegemonic men who want to assert their dominance over women and have some pretty shitty takes. Although the risk for R-word in college is rampant, it is much worse for women, with 23% of women experiencing it compared to only 5% of men. Women are clearly at much greater risk on college campuses within Captain Cook culture, which is so bizarre because oftentimes this is a culture that's framed as highly empowering to women. Then there are, of course, the health risks for women in particular. There are things like diseases that you can get. 19% of college students have one of those diseases, and it's been linked with Captain Cook culture in particular because people in Captain Cook culture tend to not be protected as well as they should. Women are also more likely to develop a UTI than men are. Cancer complications due to HPV are more common for women than they are for men. And because women are expected to perform certain types of casual favors to men, they're also at higher risk of contracting certain illnesses. Men tend to not want to be protected in these encounters because they want to maximize how much fun they're having, which implies that a man's satisfaction is more important than a woman's very safety. And not only is it more important than her safety, it is of course also more important than her having a good time. Unfortunately, the research shows that within Captain Cook culture, women have less fun, let's just say. I don't know how veiled I need to be for this part, but women are less satisfied with it. Women are far more satisfied with committed relationships, physically speaking. Men in non-committed relationships are much more likely to not pay any attention or mind to a woman having a good time. It sets up this giver-receiver dynamic between women and men, where women are expected to give and men are expected to receive. The research shows that there are kind of 4 reasons why women tend to have less fun during these interactions. Women only really tend to report that they enjoy casual encounters about 50% of the time compared to 81% of the time when they're having an encounter within a relationship. One of these reasons is technical. When people are participating in a casual encounter, they're not as likely to participate in the certain behaviors that are going to make it more fun for the woman. That is more something that's kept for relationships. The second reason is that within a relationship, it's more partner specific. Your partner knows what you like, whereas in casual encounters, your partner doesn't know you as well, doesn't know what you want. A third reason is that women who are in relationships are more satisfied in general with the relationship, which plays a huge impact in whether they're going to be satisfied physically as well. So in casual encounters, they're not as satisfied emotionally, and they're also not as satisfied physically because the two are more linked for women than they are for men. And the fourth reason, and the most concerning one why these interactions are not as positive for women, is because men in non-committal relationships just don't care as much about women having a good time. So a study found that all 4 of these reasons played a role in why women are not as satisfied in non-committal encounters. Another negative consequence for women specifically is unmet expectations. College students tend to describe their ideal partner in terms of attractiveness, personality, and potential for relationship. Although men and women tend to have similar expectations for a non-committal partner, women tend to be less satisfied with those expectations being met. 40% of women describe a discrepancy between their ideal and actual non-committal partner, whereas it's only 17% for men. 36% of women describe this discrepancy between their ideal and actual non-committal partner as very different, which is only true for 17% of men. Another reason why women feel they have expectations that aren't met is a lot of women tend to expect friends with benefits relationships to turn into a romantic relationship. This is also true for other forms of non-committal relationships, not just friends with benefits. Women tend to expect that it's going to turn into something more than men do. There have been a few theories to explain why this might be the case, why women have more unmet expectations than men do. There's this theory that casual relationships are more evolutionarily dangerous for women than they are for men, that women are socialized to desire more emotional intimacy than men are, and that women experience double standards. By trying to turn relationships which are by definition casual into something not casual, it goes against the very principles of what Captain Cook culture stands for. And some women have found a way to make this transition, but a lot don't, and they find their expectations are not met. Another negative aspect for women, like I mentioned, is men positioned as the romantic gatekeepers, the ones who get to decide, are you a woman who's worth dating or not? Men are afforded more control over partner selection and romantic development, with many women unknowingly sharing men that they think they're not sharing. This is particularly true on campuses where men are the minority, because when men are the minority, they get to form the culture. They're not in abundance, so women kind of just take whatever they can get. Then there's a very huge and vague category of negative consequences for women, which I'll just call negative emotional consequences. Women have reported psychological distress, vulnerability to poor psychosocial adjustment, depression, pressure, performance anxiety, loneliness, regret, lack of control, emotional pain, the disintegration of a friendship, emotional suppression, the idealization of detachment and emotionless, a distorted sense of safety with their partner, low self-esteem, lack of healthy communication with the partner, loss of social support from friends, interpersonal conflict as a result of these encounters, negative social consequences, emotional shutdown, a loss in support group, anxiety. A huge one appears to be regret about the encounter. 62% of college students experience this. There seem to be several reasons why students tend to experience regret. One is that they regret who they chose to be their partner. Another one is that they experience negative social repercussions. Another one is that their expectations were not met during the relationship. Another one is moral ambivalence. They weren't sure morally if they wanted to do it or not. Regret due to the speed and the level of intoxication that they experienced at the time of the encounter. And physical dissatisfaction. So a lot of different possible reasons to regret why an encounter happened. Women in particular tend to have higher rates of regret, shame, and guilt after these encounters. So quite a few negative consequences for college students and women specifically. Now let's look at some of the pros. There are some physical benefits. Taking part in any sort of physical interaction tends to have many health benefits, such as aiding your respiratory, cardiovascular, immune, and reproductive systems, mental health benefits such as lower anxiety and depression. This isn't specific to non-committal relationships, but just physical relationships in general. Also, because of the vast normalization of Captain Cook culture, there is a tiny bit of protection for women against stigma. A woman can say that she Captain Cooked up with someone instead of being more specific, which allows her some ambiguity and some anonymity about what actually went down and protect her from stigma. Because it's a very vague word, there's no real operational definition out in the real world. The issue remains, though, that a lot of women are still shamed even if they're ambiguous, or if they're not ambiguous. That's important too. Another potential benefit for women is intimacy if that's what they want, or lack of intimacy if that's what they want. So you can kind of frame it in both ways. These casual relationships can provide closeness, companionship, comfort, security, and trust that is associated with committed relationships, especially if we're thinking about something more long-term, like a friends with benefits situation. It can result in a momentary feeling of closeness to another human being, which can prove helpful if you're lacking support or you're just feeling lonely or bored. 57% of college students also see the potential of forming a romantic relationship as a benefit of these casual relationships. 67% of college students actually did meet within the context of Captain Cook culture before they transitioned into a stable romantic relationship. And even for those that don't end up dating, they can still develop a friendship. So on one hand, these casual relationships can increase intimacy, which can be a benefit, and on the other hand, they can decrease intimacy, which can be a benefit for some women who want that. It can be a way to decrease intimacy, postpone commitment, avoid relationships, and instead focus on yourself. Some of these intimacy-aversive women tend to prefer to focus on academic and occupational achievement without the distractions of a relationship. 55% of college students take part in these relationships to avoid intimacy. So 55% do it to avoid intimacy, and about 45% do it to get closer to the other person, which, if you think about it, means that half of this population is trying to do very opposite of the other half, which can explain a lot of the issues and complications that come up when these two groups of people clash. Another benefit for women is confidence and excitement. Women report feeling more attractive, desired, and validated from these interactions. They gain confidence, they gain experience, and they're able to explore their desires and their self-identity. Additionally, having the choice to do what they want, having that personal agency, can also be empowering for women. It can provide them a sense of control over their own lives and their environment. For instance, there was a case study of a woman in Australia who, following a long-term relationship dissolution, felt very empowered by the ability to go out and participate in these casual relationships. Of course, that's only a case study, it's only a sample size of one, but it's clear that this can be a benefit for some women. So those are the positives. Like I said, this will probably be the longest section of this series. Next, I'm going to talk about Captain Cook culture for men specifically, and then I think I'm going to look at some intersectional variables, some demographic variables, and how that influences people's involvement in this culture. Hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think about these findings down below, and I'll see you next time.